Hello everyone, this is Robert, and this is Crippling Depression, or at least what is left of it after AVC 2022. In this video I'm going to do the event recap, tell you what happened, show you all the fights. Check the description down below. There will be a fights only edit of this video without me talking, so you can just watch the fight straight through, and also check out the chapters so you can skip around and go directly to the sections that you want. So let's get started and talk about AVC 2022. Okay, so where to start? AVC 2022 had a lot of different entrants, had a lot of different weight classes. It was featherweight, hobby weight, and then you had your insect classes and plastic ants and all that good stuff, as is usual. So there's two different arenas. I decided to just only bring Crippling Depression. I could have brought Psychotic Break. Lola Man's kind of dead, but I decided to just focus on Crippling Depression. You guys have seen all the videos I've been coming out with on that. So this was the only bot that I had. For my very first match of the day, it was against Binari, which was kind of this shuffle undercutter robot. It had a interesting shuffle mechanism, and then it had an undercutter, which is pretty much exactly what I just said, and it had UHMW panels on the side. There really is no strategy with Crippling Depression. I just decided to, have it as is. I had the smaller wedge on the back. This is the bigger one. Smaller wedge, classic undercutter, nice and simple. So let's see how that went. So I got that win against Binari. It was an okay fight. I forget how squirrely Crippling Depression is. It's very fast, so it's really difficult to control. And I also had my turning rate set too high, so it was just turning instantly. And once again, I forgot how fast it is. Definitely a little bit too fast, I think, for my liking, going from driving heavyweights, which were kind of a little bit more sluggish, down to one of these. It's just way, way, way too zippy and too quick. And the steel floor is also really slippery as well. But got a couple good hits on them. The undercutter, I remember, kind of doesn't always hit in the right spot. Weapon to weapon, it's totally fine, but then it's kind of like up too high. So when I get flipped upside down, it was just kind of at a weird angle up top. But I did manage to actually hit right in the front, which actually crushed some of their weapon bearings on the front and disabled one of the weapons. Got a couple hits on the side panels, carved off some UHMW, and that was about it. Towards the end, you can see that the weapon really wasn't spinning right, and we don't really know what that was. Something was happening, who knows, but it was taking a little bit more time to feather it up than normal. And throughout this whole competition, you'll notice that the weapon just doesn't really seem to be as effective as it was. And I'm kind of noticing that over the years of Crippling Depression, the weapon has gotten less and less effective. It used to have a really nasty weapon, but for some reason it just always kind of seems like it's fighting against itself or rubbing or something. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed and kind of, you know, a sign of things to come. So got the win, stayed in the winner's bracket, but our next fight was up against Beam again. So that's right, our next fight was up against Beam, made by Micah, who's a Copperhead team member. They were supposed to fight Yahoo, which is a drum spinner, yet again another Copperhead teammates, Pete and Chad. So Beam was supposed to fight Yahoo, but Yahoo just decided to drop down. They didn't want to get, I don't know, demolished, or they didn't want to fight a robot. Sorry, Pete. So they got bumped down into the loser's bracket, and then that means I automatically had to fight Beam. Now, if anyone follows Crippling Depression, you know that Beam and I fought several years ago, and that was a really good fight. I ended up getting the win, but I ended up taking significant amount of damage. Beam is really nasty and almost impossible to kill. So this was going to be a very interesting fight. So no real strategy, just kind of do what we always do. I was going to try and use the wedge a little bit more, but the driving was just kind of weird on this. I really wasn't too confident about that, but let's see how that fight went. So the Beam and Crippling Depression rematch.
Judges, are you ready? In 3, 2, 1, fight! I will get started come back by the reaction court or you have to do it.
Way to go, guys.
Why'd you do that?
That's why we can't have nice things.
We're past in 2 minutes. We secured again. You good? All right, competitors, are you ready? Judges, are you ready? All right, 2 minutes remaining. 3, 2, 1, fight! Crippling Depression is tapped down. Good fight. Good fight. All right, we got the magic smoke coming out of Crippling Depression. We got magic smoke.
So at this point, we didn't really know what was wrong with Crippling Depression. The smoke is never a really good sign. It looked kind of heavy, so we thought it was lipo smoke, but it really wasn't as, I guess it wasn't as much as what we thought it would be. So we took it outside and opened it up really quick just to take a look, and this is what we saw.
Well, Robert, what'd you think of that fight?
Did I win?
I think so.
So after getting everything opened up, we found that one of the weapon ESCs had just decided to commit suicide in the worst way possible. You can kind of see me trying to turn it off in the very beginning, and I couldn't get it off because everything had shifted so much and I couldn't get access to the switch. So it was actually still on and smoldering. So all that smoke that you saw from us dragging it outside was this ESC still burning. So it was still burning until we could fully open everything up and turn off the battery, and it just looked amazing. It was crispy. The whole thing was completely cooked through, and anything that was kind of surrounding it and touching it got this black, delicious smoke on it. And so the radio was pretty well toasted. The BEC was pretty well toasted. Everything else generally worked. And what had ultimately happened during the fight is, in a couple of those big hits, the front panel just kind of got crushed in, and one of those whole drive sides just decided to get kind of bound up. So we were kind of crab walking halfway through the fight, and then something happened with the weapon. You know, there's just a lot of damage going on. One of the ESCs blew. That probably caused a little bit of an issue with the other one, and that's ultimately what caused the bot to just kind of die. And we did end up having an issue with the BEC. So good job, Micah. Well done. You got your rematch and you won, but let's talk about some of the further damage. So before I show you a couple pictures of Beam, here's a good front shot of Crippling Depression that we took right after. You can see that that front panel took a significant amount of damage, is missing a piece, and that whole side is just kind of bent and warped. And so that whole drive side was non-functional because everything was just kind of bound up and crushed in place. So that was a bit of a problem. If we look at Beam, you can see that we actually did land a few hits. You can see that the back panel kind of got crushed in, and some of the screws actually got broken off inside that panel, so that was a little bit of a problem for him. And then just a lot of these panels aren't really as straight as they should be. So we did end up doing a lot of damage, but none of these things really affected the bot in any meaningful way, so he was able to make some fixes and keep going. Our next fight was up against Anarchi, so let's talk about that. So we needed to get ready for the next fight against Anarchi. The drive worked, it's just it was bound up on that one side. So we just took a wood chisel and basically just cut out any of the sections that were bound up. It's just UHMW, so you can just kind of use a wood chisel that away, free that up. The electronics and the motors, all that stuff was perfectly fine. It's just the aluminum panels had actually crushed in. You can kind of see it move in, and it was just crushing the UHMW against the wheel. So we just chiseled that away. That got the drive working, and in terms of the weapon, the mechanical side of the weapon was fine. We just kind of lost that one side from that little bit of crispiness. So we took out that ESC, took out that motor, and we're running on just the one motor. So it was able to keep going, and Anarchi is a four-wheel drive, I guess, horizontal mid-cutter. So, we'll just see how that goes.
Sure, yeah. Just trying to build suspense here. All right. And 3, 2, 1, fight him! And Crippling Depression is making an early advance on Anarchi. Anarchi's having a little bit of motor problems, but still moving. That weapon has no problem spooling up. That Crippling Depression is ready for a fight. Unfortunately, that weapon is just a little bit taller than the whole robot is. It's not getting a really good fight in the security. So it looks like Crippling Depression is going to make this a quick fight. If they can avoid that weapon. Alright, Crippling Depression pushing Anarchi into the corner. Baby's right in the corner, Anarchi. And Crippling Depression here to make sure that the answer to that is no. Purple lands. We have motor control. Looks like the Anarchi's pretty well wedged into the corner. We're doing this. Okay, we're going to count down. If you take it out, we got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's it.
So Anarchi was having some drive issues. Once you start getting further and further into the competition, stuff starts to kind of break and the bots end up being a little less than perfect condition. So they were having some drives, which was good. You could hear that our weapon was really kind of struggling. There was a lot of noise from it. It was rubbing against the frame. We decided to go with the weapon up because we were really worried about it dragging on the ground. Things were just kind of really not square, so we were, worried about it just kind of digging into the ground, adding a lot of excess resistance, which would then cause the other motor to end up dying, and it's just a little bit more work to replace. So we ran it facing up, and it worked out relatively well. You can see that the drive is strange. The drive itself worked just fine, but I was having some radio issues. So turns out, long story short, the BEC was dead or dying. Something was definitely going wrong with the BEC, which is the thing that gives signal to the radio. So we were actually having some issues with it cutting out. So there's a couple times where I was just driving straight into the wall and just kind of staying there. That was not me, that was the BEC just kind of cutting out, and the bot would just kind of keep going in that direction. So something was really weird, and we ended up fixing that for the next fight. Our next fight was up against Yahoo, which was the bot that didn't want to fight against Beam, so now we're meeting down in the losers bracket. So that will be interesting. The good news is that I live relatively close to the venue. I'm only like 15 minutes away, and that was the end of this day. It was a 2-day event, so I was able to actually go home, take things apart, and fix it. So let's see how that fight went. So even though I was able to go home and open this up and use my full shop to fix everything, we found a lot more issues. And ultimately what it came down to, and the reason you don't see a weapon on here right now, is the weapon would either drag on the ground or it would interfere too much with the frame. We had both of those as options. Now, I have spacers that I can space it out from the body, and we could easily space it out to where it wasn't hitting the frame and we could run upside down. However, Yahoo is, of course, a drum bot, so we were really worried that all they'd have to do is just tap us, flip over, and then we would just be high side on the weapon. We wouldn't be able to drive. So we made the really awful decision to run without a weapon because there was really no good way to use the weapon effectively. We were either going to drag it on the ground or it would just be bound into the frame and be ineffective there. So what we did is run without the weapon and then switched over to the big wedge. This is the big 1/4 inch thick solid titanium wedge. This thing is a bit of a beast, so we were hoping that that would help us out. So this is essentially the configuration that we were running. Everything is kind of taped together. This is actually carbon fiber tape that is holding all the panels in place. We've got a bunch of UHMW missing. So this is about as good as I could get it. And the really sad thing is I spent several hours the night before, after a full day of competition. I spent several hours getting all the electronics pristine, getting the BEC switched out, trying to get a new radio and realizing that the toasted one actually worked the best, and getting everything working just to end up not running a weapon. So I could have just saved 3 hours, but that's something else. So let's see how that fight went against Yahoo.
Yes.
So yeah, that match didn't end up lasting that long. I really wish I would have had a weapon because maybe that could have disrupted something up front, but I just don't think there was really in the cards to win that fight. The drive was being a little bit weird. I wasn't able to just point the wedge to them reliably. I don't really know what was going on, but it just didn't seem to want to drive the way. There was no good connection between me and the bots. It just wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So it is what it is, but that is the end of this competition. So Crippling Depression did not place, didn't really get anywhere, had 4 official fights. We did end up doing a grudge match against Dragonfruit, and I'll show that to you next. The bots still worked. I mean, it still turned on. The motor still spun for the weapon, and the drive still worked. As you can see, it's still functional. It's just really beat up and needs to be retired, and so it's getting retired. So let's watch the Dragonfruit fight, and then I'll come back and kind of give you some final thoughts and what is next for Crippling Depression.
Are you ready? Audience, are you ready? Audience, we're gonna let the audience decide this. All right, in 3, 2, 1, fight!
So yeah, I guess that's it for Crippling Depression. I think final thoughts is I think the drive on this is probably one of the better things I've designed over the course of my combat robot career. The drive is really good. It gets bound up when there's significant damage to the frame. And I mean, I'm talking like significant damage, like this thing is just being held together by tape right now. But generally speaking, yeah, it's got a pretty decent drive. The weapon was a little bit fiddly, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with it overall. It was a good bot. So going forward, I think there's going to be a taxidermy project involved here. I want to mount this, I want to display this in some way, so I have some ideas. I'm not going to talk about them just yet, but stay tuned on my channel for that. This is going to happen relatively soon. So yeah, thanks for watching. Check out all the links down below, and don't worry, I still have a lot more projects that I'm working on. I want to get done with this and move on to a bunch of other things. So be sure to check out my channel for all sorts of new and fun things. A lot of it is going to be interesting to you guys. So thanks for watching. Crippling Depression is retired, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.